A homosexualist is the one who protects, promotes, defends. So let it be life imprisonment for whoever recruits our children, for whoever gets involved in making sure that our children are involved into this.
These people should be castrated. Yes. So despite her being sexually woman, she defends herself as a man. I find it very vague.
And Uganda ain't playing. So this past week, the Parliament of Uganda made LGBTQ illegal. Anybody that participates in LGBTQ activity could be subject to the death penalty in Uganda.
The bill was supported by a bipartisan number of MPs. It was proposed by an opposition MP, but the government threw its weight behind it, consulted with him, and offered to harmonize it with the existing Ugandan law. So that is why most people support it. However, there's also condemnation from human rights groups, from civil society organizations, and from the queer community in Uganda and across Africa that say this endangers their lives because it identifies, it criminalizes even identifying as LGBT, not just homosexual acts, but even identifying. I want to read this section of this new law that's now going to President Museveni to assent to. A person commits the offense of homosexuality if the person holds out as lesbian, gay, transgender, a queer, or any other sexual or gender identity that is contrary to the binary categories of male and female. So
now, do you think our representatives, the one here in the United States, who claim to be a Christian nation, who claim to stand on biblical values, would do something like this? Nah, I don't think so.
Even identifying as non-binary could be illegal in Uganda. And the debate itself was 6-7 hours that was sometimes homophobic, often using dangerous rhetoric. And I want to give you a slice of what MPs were talking about on the floor.
A homosexualist is the one who protects, promotes, defends. So let it be life imprisonment for whoever recruits our children, for whoever gets involved in making sure that our children are involved into this.
Man, we need this dude over here. I would love to prosecute some of these drag queen people who are parading around half naked in front of children.
These people should be castrated. Yes.
Whoa, castrated. Man, you know they're doing chemical castration to little boys because they think they're girls. Here in America, you know, we're the greatest exporter of filth to the world. So you gotta have countries like Uganda stand up for righteousness. Now, do I agree with criminalizing the LGBTQ? No, because I think they need to be delivered. But at least they're standing up for biblical values and principles. They're not just condoning it, accepting it, and affirming it.
So despite her being sexually woman, she defends herself as a man. I find it very vague.
To be clear, homosexuality is illegal in more than 30 of Africa's 55 nations, but this law in Uganda goes much further than any other law on the continent, probably anywhere in the world, and includes the new crime of aggravated homosexuality when it's with a child or somebody with a disability or in an altered state, and that attracts a death penalty. And it's unlikely that President Museveni wants to assent to it because he's called homosexual people in the country deviants. Listen.
The homosexuals are deviations from normal. The Western countries should stop wasting the time of humanity by trying to impose their practices on other peoples.
Wow. The Ugandan president is so true because just the day after this was announced that it passed, guess what the White House press secretary said about the act?
We have grave concerns with the passage of the Anti-Homosexuality Act, AHA, by the Parliament of Uganda yesterday, and increasing violence targeting LGBTQI+ persons. If the AHA is signed into law and enacted, it would impinge upon universal human rights, jeopardize progress in the fight against HIV/AIDS, deter tourism, and invest in Uganda and damage Uganda's international reputation. The bill is one of the most extreme anti-LGBTQI+ laws in the world. Human rights are universal. No one should be attacked, imprisoned, or killed simply because of who they are or whom they love.
It's funny. I'm curious if all the people who claim to be so pro-black, so anti-whiteness, so anti-colonialism, will they say anything to Joe Biden when he's trying to export LGBTQ, quote unquote, human rights to countries that don't want it, to sovereign countries that don't want it? You hear what she said? She said that if they pass this act, it's gonna harm them financially. It's gonna harm them. Really? Are you gonna do something to harm them as a country? Uganda is a sovereign nation, but because Joe Biden and his administration want to export LGBTQ human rights to countries that don't want it, anybody that bucks that, they give them these kind of threats. And it's so funny that Joe Biden cares more about the LGBTQ than he does about average Americans, than he does about black folks. And that's as real. That's as real as it gets. Joe Biden and his administration could care less about regular Americans, could care less about Americans who are working hard, looking to provide for their families, who want to have a stable income, who want to live out what they call the American dream. No, Joe Biden is all about intersectionality. Joe Biden is all about playing the sexual orientation card to get votes. That's what he's about. And too many people, particularly black people, fall sway to that. Now, personally, like I said, I don't consider LGBTQ, homosexuality, to be a crime. Is it a sin? Of course it is, because it's not God's best. It's not what God wants. But I don't criminalize that behavior, just like I don't criminalize people that commit adultery. It's a sin. So I don't think you should be making it personally. I wouldn't have signed a law to make it illegal to be LGBTQ, but I understand what they're doing. They're standing up for righteousness. It's about time people in leadership do the same thing.